Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pegrino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and today it is once again the spooky season, which means we played a spooky game, Layers of Fear. And joining me, as always, to discuss the spooky things, fearologist Pete Busby. Hello, Pete.
Hey, everybody. It is most definitely the spookiest of seasons, but this game made me sad. So I picked a happy fun fact for this week's podcast. This one's simple, it's straightforward, but it's great. Baby songbirds babble like human babies.
Ah!
So they don't know how to sing yet.
Aww.
They don't know how to make real bird noises, so they just sort of babble along with things they hear. Interestingly, I'll give you a little bit of science. They use a different part of their brain to babble that they will eventually use a different one when they're actually singing as adults.
Oh.
Distinct regions of the brain.
That's adorable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that other voice you may or may not have heard was our other co-host. As always, we are joined by M. Palladino, Mistress of Games. Hello, M.
Hello. I just checked the Deep Listens Basketball League. Another one of my guys is fucking out. God
Who
damn
is
it. Clay Thompson.
Clay's out?
You've done this to me, Gino. I don't know why he's out. What is he out for? He is
Rest.
not playing. There wasn't an injury referenced.
Yeah,
Knee explosions.
Just taking a break.
He's old now. He hurt his knee. He needs a break sometimes.
Oh, but he's one of my guys.
Well, we will discuss the comings and goings of the basketball league in the Discord report. But before we do that, a reminder that you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast at gmail.com. We also ask you to support the National Network of Abortion Funds if you're in a place to do so. And if you want to support the show directly, you can support the show at patreon.com/deeplistens. And if you were to do that, then we could segue cleanly into the Discord report.
The Discord report. Boop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. This week on the Discord report, our basketball league started up. I'm doing pretty good, except I don't know how this game is supposed to work. And so I might be doing bad, but secretly.
Yeah, so we're playing with roto rules, which means that every position gets 82 possible starts because there's 82 games in a season. So you could technically cycle out your players who do not have games to cycle in other players who do have games. But if you were to do that, you would end up skewing your numbers real bad because you will burn through your starts faster than a regular season would go. So, M, this is what you were doing, yes?
Yeah. I figured the way to play was put all your guys who are playing into the lineup, and therefore you will always gain points.
That's
but
true.
maybe those guys are bad.
That's the
maybe
problem.
they're not the best choice to play
Correct.
at that time.
It's about efficiency. And that's kind of what's going on is we've got a few people who are just putting everyone in every week, every day, basically. So like the person who's currently in first has 75 games played. M has 65. Person in third has 71. I'm in fourth with 57. So like there's just a huge step down in how many games played. And so eventually things will even out. But for right now, so people are juicing their numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But, you learned about it a weekend, so now you can correct. You'll
Yeah.
just need to bench someone, like one game or something. It won't take very long for you to get back onto a normal pace.
If LeBron James is out at the game time decision, I'm going to be very upset because I need a number. I need some numbers.
I need some numbers, and I need them to be big.
This is how I like to experience a sport. It's not looking at a sport being played. It's just a spray. And that's just my game design training.
Yeah.
We
And
love to look at spreadsheets.
if it does help, if a player is out and they're in your lineup, they do not count as a game started.
Oh, thank God.
So at least it doesn't like ding you with a true 0.
Oh, good. Because I had some good guys who were out yesterday.
Yes. So other things that are going on in the Discord, and what else we got?
Let's see. Anything stand out for you?
Well, I got a video intake server up and running on my machine, so we've been doing some experimental streams with a second person streaming in video to me. So we've done a couple of competitive game, like head-to-head stuff, where we'll play a roguelike. Me and Braden Arbitrary Water Redacted of Off the Deep End have done a few of these streams where we both play a roguelike. We both start at the same time, and whoever gets further wins. So we've had the first one, unfortunately, was Vampire Survivors, and that game it's not actually good for what we were trying to do because it's very hard to die.
Why not? Oh,
it's hard to die. Like if you've unlocked more content, like Braden just has played it more than me, so his character just has more health and more everything. So it's just like there's very little skill beyond like a little bit at the very beginning.
Sounds like a skill issue. Get more stuff.
Great point.
You gotta like get everything unlocked, and then you're on even playing field, and then you can actually compete.
But Hasn't capitalism taught you anything, Gino?
That's fair. I did enjoy having a stream called Vampire Survivors. But then we did FTL, and that was better because FTL hates you.
Yep.
But yeah, we played FTL, and then the stream name was FTL Fight Then Lose. FTL : Fight Then Lose.
It's pretty good.
So yeah.
Is there a delay when you do that?
It's slight.
Oh, okay.
It's a slight delay, but I just basically mute the incoming audio from the stream unless they are the main stream. Like if I've lost, the winner just takes over the stream, so then I will unmute their video and, go from there. So it's not that big of a deal. And since the audio is coming over a separate source, like from the conversation, the audio with the person is coming off over a different channel than the video, so the lag isn't that big of a deal. But yeah, it turns out it's pretty easy to set up a video ingest server. So yeah, that's going on.
Are we gonna put that?
What was that?
Fuck.
Your internet is being weird again, I'm afraid. Are we going to do what with that? Try one more time. I heard the sigh very clearly.
I was trying to ask, are we going to have some game nights featuring that?
Yes, I think we will. We definitely will get some game nights featuring that. We'll do more fun streams. And I think if we were to say, for example, do the another lesbian thirst trap rankings or some such thing, we could get several VTube rigs running at the same time on one stream, I think.
I don't think we need to relitigate that. I think we did a good job the first time. If you haven't listened to it, you should go listen to that. The second episode came out last week, and the top 10 is so good.
Yep, and I will say I would not relitigate Final Fantasy. I think we've that is concrete. It's absolute. Anyone who disagrees is wrong.
Is wrong.
But there are so many other franchises with so many other characters in there.
Name one.
Mass Effect.
That's it. That's the other one.
There's one.
There are only two.
Yeah.
Fire Emblem. I don't know.
Oh, Fire
right
Emblem
in.
would be good.
There's
right
some
in.
cuties in Fire Emblem.
What's your favorite franchise that we can play all the games of and then rank good women characters?
Yes.
Layers of Fear.
Layers of Fear.
Great segue.
We'll start there.
Yes, perfect. But before we discuss Layers of Fear, quick shout out my obsession of the week. My obsession this week is actually good segue, Pete, because I was very fearful of the layered textural of the layered videography.
You'll get there.
Of Guillermo del Toro's, is it Cabinet of Curios?
Yeah.
Curio of Catastrophes?
Cabinet of Curiosities.
Cabinet of Curiosities. That's it. Curio of Cabinets. It's a horror anthology series that is currently on Netflix that is produced by Guillermo del Toro. And if you haven't seen it, it's quite good. Different director for every episode. The influences and the style of storytelling is different from episode to episode. Like even the videography, the effects, the settings. So there's very little overlap between them, except they are all well made. So I recommend them.
Here's a question for you.
Yes.
I watched the first 2 episodes.
Yes.
Which were about, the second one was about a grave robber.
Mm-hmm.
What time period do you think that was in? Because we were trying to place it the whole time we were watching.
I'm going to say the early 1900s, a.k.a. the horror times.
Yeah. Like, it is from a Weird Tales, which was from 1936. So I put it, I guess 30s, and then I went down to 10s. I was like, I don't know. But it's weird to place that.
I mean,
it could be any time.
A bunch of these are in turn of the century. Like, when in doubt, turn of the century. Or late 1800s, early 1900s, when in doubt. Unless there's something that earmarks that it's a different time period.
Yeah.
But I've so far watched, I believe, 6 of the episodes, and every one of them has been good. I would say the most recent one, which contains Eric Andre as an actor in there.
Is he a serious actor in that, or?
Yeah, it's a horror thing. He's trying to be serious.
Okay.
It's I would say that is probably the one that I've liked the least so far, but all of them have been good. Like even that one, when it gets going, my problem with that one was just the pacing. So once it gets going, I think it's quite good. So check it out. Check out Cabinet of Curiosities, not Curio of Cabinets. You'll get something very different if you look that up.
That's something else.
Yep. All right, so without further ado, let's start talking about a different layered fear experience. Layers of Fear by Bloober Team. Pete, you picked it. You explain why.
Why? I thought it would be... why did I pick this? So it was a game about art. It's a spooky game about art, and it had very positive reviews when I looked at it. So I know nothing about Bloober Team, except that they were going to be involved in the new Silent Hill. So this seemed like a good spooky game that talks about art, which I like to do, and it turned out to not be as interesting or good as I hoped.
Yeah, that's a fair way to put it. So yeah, during the time when we, between when you picked this game and when we actually played it, Bloober Team was announced to be remaking Silent Hill 2 at the behest of Konami. So we're going to learn, some stuff about the people who are going to be remaking a game that we played earlier. Was it this year or last year? What is time?
I think it was...
It was late last year, I think.
Yeah, I think it was around this time last year.
Yeah, so we'll be learning a little bit about how Bloober Team creates games. Hopefully they've gotten better since 2016, but we'll go over why. But Pete, what is the setup for this game? Explain what this game is actually about.
Okay, so you are tortured artist protagonist. Does he get a name?
No.
I thought he had a name. Maybe he scribbles it out everywhere.
Yeah, he
does.
Crosses it out on all the articles.
So you are tortured artist protagonist. You live in this giant mansion, seemingly alone as you wander the halls, and you're trying to complete your magnum opus. And as you sort of explore the world and see things, the house deteriorates and gets spooky and weird. I think that's probably the most I can say without getting into story areas.
Yes. So you kind of wake up in this house. At first, you're exploring this empty home, but at a certain point, you enter your studio, and from that point on, you are kind of walking through this house, but also maybe walking through your mind.
Yeah.
Now, how much would you pay? So yeah, that's kind of the setup. It is a game, kind of I hate the pejorative term walking simulator, but I think it conveys kind of the gameplay that you're looking for here. You know,
If any game fits the bill, it's probably this one for a walking simulator.
You're gone home.
But it's very dark.
Yep. It's
spooky.
It's some Gone Home. It's some What Remains of Edith Finch. You know, it's that style of game. You're walking around a space. It's very bespoke, and you're opening cabinets looking for Post-it notes written places. So, Em, what did you think of this game's initial kind of intro? Because I feel like until you start getting into the studio, it feels like it might go one way, and then you get into the studio and it zags pretty hard.
Yeah. So it sort of just drops you in there. It doesn't really explain who you are or what you're doing in this house, aside from whatever you can glean from the stuff you are picking up and reading. And then you find a Post-it note that's like, I put your the key to your office in the bedroom or something. And so you take that as your cue to go and check the bedroom. Things start to get weird. Which, by the way, I posted this in the Discord, but if you and your significant other ever start communicating solely through Post-it notes that are like, you keep leaving your key lying around, so I put it in the bedroom, you might be in the lead up to a walking simulator. There were a bunch of rules I wrote out. I'm sure we'll hit on all of them as we go through this. There's might be a haunting about to happen if you start experiencing stuff like this. So anyway, you go to the office where there is a painting, you pull the tarp off, and it looks like a painting. But then you leave your office, and the layout is different.
In your house.
Your house
nonetheless
is changing.
Yeah. So, I mean, the initial setup, you're moving around a pretty normal house. I mean, it's old and decrepit, but it's a house. Once you go outside, it becomes a linear or a relatively linear game from there. So at first, you're kind of in a hub and you're investigating to try and open up rooms and stuff like that. It felt to me like it was going to be like Gone Home, right? Which we've played, 6-7 years ago now.
It's forever.
Yeah, but Gone Home, it's one house, and you are just getting information or keys or things to access different parts of that house. In this game, it feels like it's going to be that way, and then as soon as you open that door after you go in your office, now it's kind of a linear experience where you're going into rooms. Sometimes there are options of which rooms to go into, but you're mostly just maintaining forward momentum until you are led back to that initial room. Because the hallways and rooms and doors, they kind of operate on impossible geometry rules. Like, everything's connected, but not in normal ways. You know, the hallways are not actually connected to where they should be based on how the house is laid out. So I actually found the game much less interesting the moment I went into the studio. I thought it was going to be a very big house with a lot of exploration and doubling back and the house changing underneath you, but instead it just becomes a very straightforward, haunted house, for lack of better terms, right? Like you're put on the conveyor belt, stuff's going to jump out at you and try and scare you, and then you'll just keep going because ultimately nothing can hurt you.
Yeah, there's this concept in actual haunted houses. It's throughput, basically. It's like a haunted house needs to get like X number of people through an hour in order to make profit. So they have to keep the scares and the groups spaced correctly. So they always scare behind people, not in front of them, because they want them to move forward, not back. And the whole time I was thinking, like playing this game, I was thinking like, yeah, this is like an actual haunted house, but not in an interesting like, oh gosh, what's that game we played where I'm not going to describe it well. Where the like office building kept changing and there were aliens and like weird fridges and stuff.
What the fuck?
Oh crap. Are you thinking of, it's on Steam. Let me look at my library real quick.
There was that room full of clocks.
Yes, the room full of clocks. I've got it. Just checking right now. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
I'll come in with the name when I remember.
While Gino's looking at, that's the sort of experience I was expecting, right? Where the world's constantly changing, but you can sort of explore these different rooms. Whereas instead, you get a series of, let's call them increasingly spooky hallways.
Oh boy, this is gonna bother me if I can't find it.
Listeners, if you're with us live,
The Stanley Parable. You're thinking of the Stanley Parable, I think.
Stanley Parable. Yes.
Is that it? I
Maybe.
guess that is the office.
You're in an office space, and it starts out as a normal office, but
And
like
it
the
starts
more you
getting
explore,
weird.
it
Yeah,
gets
okay.
weird and weird and weird. Yeah. But yeah, this game is much more of a traditional. Here's some levels. Here's the scare. And I feel like this even operates on horror, like haunted house rules for how the scares work. Like you get to a spot, you step on the pressure plate basically, and then something jumps out and spooks you. You know, or you get to a dead end and then you turn around and then things behind you, and then you turn back around and the wall's gone. Like they have 4 or 5 types of scares that they use at most, and they just keep running them back. For sure. Like there are very few moments in this game where you didn't just get to a dead end and then you have to turn around, or you get to an object, you stare at it, it changes in front of you, you turn around. You hear a thing, you turn, there's a thing. There's really no nuance to most of the horror in this game. It's do you care about, do jump scares bother you? And if they don't, you're not going to be that perturbed.
My favorite one was when you are walking through a hall and there is a sign that says "Don't turn around," and if you turn around, you will get scared. I did not turn around. I just walked forward.
So you didn't get scared?
No, I didn't get scared. But so I don't
Just
actually
refuse
know.
to notice ghosts.
Yeah, I didn't know it was behind me. If you guys turned around, I would love to know what actually happens. But I assume a thing jumps out at you.
Oh yeah, so what's behind you is your wife.
Yeah.
Because this
Your
game,
spooky wife.
you have a spooky wife whose name is Wife. So the main protagonist is a tortured artist. She is a like concert pianist who they get married, and then their marriage starts to break down, and she haunts your character throughout much of the game. And if you've ever played PT, the playable teaser that was supposed to be the teaser for Silent Hills before Hideo Kojima was chased out of Konami, and then PT was subsequently removed from all online distributors. The woman from PT is just, it's the same design. If you could look up, I think it's a video from Bob Vids, I believe is the name of the person's account. But it basically, it lays out a number of ways Bloober Team has kind of ripped off or bit other artists and their designs and their games and their artistic designs, like all those things. The character of the wife looks almost exactly like the woman from PT. They animate the same way. They have the same, they're both missing an eye in the same eye. They both have about the same length hair. They move the same way. The same thing happens to you when they catch you, which is the wife will like snap your neck. The woman from PT does the same thing. So yeah, it's bad. It's not great. That they just seem to have repurposed another game's design. And also this game plays just like PT in a lot of cases as well. PT was about wandering a small house, kind of wandering the same hallway, and as you wander the hallway, it's a possible geometry. There are subtle changes every time you navigate the hallway, and so it's figuring out how to move the game forward when you're not in a new space. This game does the same sort of things several times with looping through hallways.
Yeah, there's specifically one point where you start going around a hallway that is literally a square, and then it starts to change. I was like, oh, they're really doing this. They're actually just gonna nail it right to they're gonna hang that lampshade right here, huh? No self-awareness at all.
No, just pure reproduction.
Yep. It's like, yeah, okay. You think you're PT, but are you PT?
Did you do a good job? Did you do a good enough job? We'll see. Also, PT was free.
Yeah.
So yeah, the one interesting thing I think about this character, and kind of it ties into the jump scares and the quick turnaround, jump out sort of jump scares. Your character, because he has a prosthetic leg, he moves a little bit slowly, and he's got a little bit of a gait to his walk. But also the default camera speed is very slow. It's one of the slowest camera sensitivities I've ever experienced. And at first, I thought, this is really weird. Why is it so slow? It's so swimmy. It's not swimmy. It's like molasses turning the sky around. He's like a battleship. And I wasn't sure why the default camera sensitivity would be set to that. I've never played a game that set the sensitivity this low before. And I realized a lot of the triggers for when the scares occur in this game are literally predicated on when you turn around.
Yep.
So the faster you turn around, the less effective the scares are. The more responsive and faster your camera moves, the more you can trigger these triggers. Because some of the triggers in this game just require you to spin around, right? Like you turn one way, there's a scare. You turn back around, there's another scare. You turn back around again, there's another scare. If your camera moves very quickly, you can actually just spin in place, and you'll end up seeing all of those triggers in like a few seconds. Whereas if you leave it at the default speed, it will take, maybe 30 seconds, and all of these scares kind of land with proper pacing. So I almost immediately turned the camera sensitivity up because I couldn't deal with how slow my character moved. But I think it was done intentionally to make the pacing of the scares work. Did y'all have a similar experience? Pete, did you change the camera sensitivity?
I left it at the default just because that's generally what I do. I don't go into the menus too often. But I agreed with you that it was very slow. And a lot of the triggers, even, there's some that it's not even just turning around. It's like, no, you need to stare at this thing for a little while. And I don't know, I assume some of that had to do with it's an art game. They want you to look at the art. Because, credit where credit's due. Most of the paintings, in fact, maybe even all of the paintings they pick are real paintings.
Yeah.
But I don't know. If I wanted to look at art, I would go look at art. I would do it on my low resolution screen here.
Yeah. Go ahead, Em.
I was gonna. I thought that the triggers were you have to stare at things for a certain amount of time, and that fills a bar, and then when the bar loads up, that is what triggers the scare portion.
Mm-hmm.
But then after you were like, oh yeah, it's just they're basically just doing a raycast. I was like, yeah, they sure are, aren't they?
Would you mind explaining to the listeners who don't know what a raycast is, what a raycast is?
I was about to ask.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gino.
So in Unity, which is what this game is made in, there is a certain thing you can do, which is a raycast, which is basically firing a laser from the center of your screen forward, and then if it hits something that has an effect, that will trigger that effect. It is basically if you are looking at something, shoot a little laser pointer at it, and then that object will have change painting to spooky mode. That's basically what it is. It's a way of triggering effects that isn't stepping in a certain box. Is if you. This is also how like shooting works in shooter games. It's basically just draw a line towards a thing. Is that thing a player? Put a minus on their health, and then make some shooting effects. So yeah, this game doesn't do that, but it has all of the other uses of it, basically.
Yeah, and like you can use raycast for like distances as well. Like you draw a line, how far is it from you to the thing that it hit, and that comes up, I think, a decent amount as well. Though I don't know sometimes if they're using it for distance or if there's just actually a plate, because a lot of times when stepping on a specific spot causes a trigger to occur, you're in a narrow hallway. So like kind of pressure plate style triggers tend to be best when you can guarantee a player is going to be coming at a thing from a specific spot. You don't want people to be able to walk around it or like jump over it, which your character can't jump. They also can't move very fast. So these narrow hallways make for very easy placement of proximity triggers.
I could explain that. You wanna get a little in the weeds here?
Sure, go for it.
I would love to get in the weeds.
So basically, the way this works, instead of a pressure plate, there is an invisible game object that has a on collision enter, which means when the player enters it, it will detect that collision and then it will affect something within the world. So in the funniest case, probably, there's a video of this in the Discord if you want to scroll back a little bit. There is a hallway.
You could find this very quickly. If you look up Layers of Fear child.
It is the first thing that will pop up.
Yes.
And actually, Bob Vids, the guy who you mentioned earlier, is the guy who posted this. Whenever people are like, Bloober Team aren't that bad, they understand horror. I think of this clip of Churma playing Layers of Fear. And then he's just walking down the hallway, and then he hits a trigger, and then a child runs out of a side hall and like slams its head against the wall, which also makes the funniest sound effect I've ever heard in a video game. It's like a thunk.
It's a thunk and then a
thunk. It's so ridiculous. But here's the problem with this sort of trigger, is that it will trigger every time that you step into the thing, unless you put a safeguard in there, which is like just if 0, trigger this effect. If 1 or higher, don't do this. But Bloober Team did not think to do that, so
so the baby just sprints out all the time.
Yeah.
If you just keep
Churma finds the like trigger plate, and then he just like keeps going back and forth, and so the baby keeps running out, slamming against the wall, making that sound effect.
It will spawn a baby as fast as you can go. Is how many babies you can get slamming into this wall. Yes. I at one point I think had 3 on screen at the same time. Each just thunk, 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 thunk.
That's good horror. Bloober Team, that's it.
Yeah.
That hallway is
so much of
so
the fear
bad
out of it.
I mean, it's not even just that. Like, you could trigger. There's one like so. They use this baby multiple times, and we'll start getting into the story a little bit soon. But in that hallway, like, there's a right turn you can make when you first get into the hallway, and it causes a baby to like run down a hall. And if you follow the baby down the hall, it's a right turn, right turn, right turn. You're back where you started, even though that's impossible. The geometry's impossible.
Whoa, it's spooky house. Doesn't make any sense.
But you can keep doing it. You can keep just going right. And if you go right, it will always cause the baby to come back, and you can follow the baby again. So you can just keep looping. And then the next, if you ignore the right turn there, then there's the infamous, baby slamming into the wall, which you can trigger as much as you want. If you go down another side hallway, you again end up at the beginning of this hallway again. So I can see why they set everything up, because they wanted people to be able to trigger these events multiple times. They were thinking you'd do it by going down one of the little slides that set you back at the beginning. but it turns out they didn't even bother to make sure that you had to go back to the beginning to reset the event. It just resets. It just will trigger. There's no reset at all. So I feel like calling attention to these different types of triggers really it jumps out to me as someone who was playing this game, how artificial all of the scares were. It felt like a chintzy haunted house. Nothing felt natural. Nothing felt organic. Pete, would verisimilitude be the word for what I'm looking for here? There's not a lot of it.
Yeah, it's hard to say verisimilitude in a game about ghosts, but I think it still applies.
Like, there's no believability. Like, at no point
that fits.
There's no stakes to any of this. Like, I can see the wires, and if I can see the wires, and I'm not really like, if you can see the wires in a game, it becomes campy to a certain degree. But this game really thinks it's doing some cool stuff. It's, I think, a little bit too in love with its aesthetic and storytelling. So it doesn't even work as camp in a lot of cases.
There's also, and this is jumping ahead, but I want to say it because it relates to the point you're making, Gino. There's a scene later on where there's a very dramatic scene in a bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, what's going on in the bathroom, very serious, very heavy. But the protagonist is trying to get into the bathroom and he's banging on it. He uses the phrase, "Come on, I really need to go."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what grown-ass man in the 1920s bangs on a bathroom door and says, "Come on, I really need to go"? Like, it doesn't work. It doesn't fit with, like, the very heavy atmosphere they're trying to cultivate in this scene.
Yeah, for sure.
Tone issues, let's say.
Yeah, let's say
if
tone
we're being
issues.
generous, we could say tone
Yeah.
issues.
We're being very nice, and so we say tone issues. So yeah, this game's story, like, we've been talking about a lot of the triggers, the jump scare types, and I will say, if at any point in this game you don't know how to progress, just spin around. Just have your character go up to a wall with an object on it. If there's an object on the wall, go up in front of it and then just spin around, please. You'll be fine. Just spin in circles.
If you're in a room without a door, it's behind you.
It's behind you now. It wasn't there before. It's there now. Something might jump out at you. If you've noticed that you've walked to a dead end and you turn around and now there's a dead end again, literally just do 360s. And all of the horror stuff will play out in about 10 to 15 seconds. So just do it. You'll be fine. So the story here, Tortured Artist has been working on his magnum opus. You're starting with a relatively blank canvas. You kind of go into these hallways to find bits to complete his magnum opus, and each of them is kind of a level. And then you come back and you will add to the painting, and once you get all 6 essential pieces of the magnum opus, you will get an ending. So, Em, why don't you break down some of the things we learned about Tortured Artist, and why don't you explain what the first thing you need is?
Sure. So what do we learn? He's very into his art. He thinks he's a genius, maybe not so much. His wife becomes pregnant. She has a daughter. He buys a dog. He doesn't like the dog. He might kill the dog eventually. We're not entirely sure. He has a drinking problem. He doesn't like the noise that his child is making.
Doesn't like his child's art either.
Yeah, he doesn't. He critiques his child's crayon drawings, which there's.
To be fair, are shit.
Yeah, he's not wrong.
They're not very good, but she draws a horse and then he sketches a horse over the drawing.
But like
He's
a
like,
photorealistic.
God, you
horse.
fucking 4-year-old don't never even seen a horse. Just he's a real piece of work as far as main characters go.
But you see, at one point I picked up a scrap of paper that just said schizophrenic ? Or like the wife is filling out a checklist that's like, is my husband schizophrenic? Well, he does have a change of moods, and he does have a drinking problem. And like that's all the explanation they give for what's going on with main character.
One of the details I do like is that he keeps seeing rats around, and then a lot of the things that you pick up are like, I don't know what's wrong with this guy. There's no fucking rats. We've looked so many times. Zero instance of rats.
And he keeps sending threatening letters to the exterminator's mother.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's like cursing out the guy's mother. And the guy's like, there's no rats. But all the time you're seeing rats scurrying around. I don't know.
And,
I was like, all right, that one's a little okay. I'll
And he
give him
has-
that one.
he has a bunch of drawings of rats, his rat series that you can pick up. And
I
they're
did like to-
collectibles.
He's commissioned to do illustrations for Little Red Riding Hood too, and he
Mhm.
does just the like goriest, darkest illustrations you could possibly think of. I was like, that's a baller move. I support that.
And the guy who commissioned them is like, "How dare you? You
It's like,
knew
what the
that
hell,
this was
man?
vile.
Why
You
would
used
you
to do cool
this?
stuff." So
I
yeah,
feel like in the 20s they wouldn't give much of a fuck about how gory it was.
No,
I'm-
20s.
I feel like they were pretty. I don't know. I don't think they were making like, oh, we have to be nice to the children art at that time.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
think
like
that the-
childhood was even a concept then.
Yeah.
It was like,
No.
oh, they're tiny adults. Like, just put them in a different room or whatever.
Fuck them kids.
well, this child could have been in a mine, so I guess this is better than that.
Yes.
But yeah, like this, you find out all these factoids, the wife, and we can elaborate more on the wife and the baby. But like the end of the first section, you find a strip of flesh, and then you get some narration of the main character saying how he needed a better canvas, and so he used skin. And so every section that you go down, the level will end with you getting some sort of piece of human body, basically.
Yeah.
A wife piece.
Well, the spoilers. Getting,
Is it?
well, I mean, I thought at first, because the main character has a prosthetic leg, I was
Used
like,
his
oh,
own
maybe
leg.
he used his own flesh or his own
That would have
blood.
been more interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was a Dorian Gray situation because they put the portrait of Dorian Gray everywhere in this damn game. Like, there's covers of that book everywhere. They also use a bunch of real world art, just like uncredited all over the place.
Yeah, I wondered about that too. I guess it's public domain, most of it by now.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
public domain, but you could still give credit. Like, I think there's Jupiter devouring his sons
Yep.
in there prominently. There's, I think it's Man in a Red Turban by Jan van Eyck.
That was my
That's in
favorite
there.
jump scare, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
When you turn around and Man in Turban is there, just fine.
Just big, but huge.
Just huge, very close to your face.
Oh, my favorite was when I was in a library and I turned around and there was just a pile of books in the shape of a guy. And
Yeah,
then they
that
fell
was
down.
I like when you're in the kids' room and like the carousel spinning and you turn around and see the crib again and there's just a little doll smashing its head against it over and over again.
It's also
Yeah.
very funny.
That's really good too. Every time the carousel goes around, it's like the room gets a little bit more full of dolls.
No.
The windows are just opening and shutting furiously.
Yeah. Just the laziest scares throughout this game. So the story-wise, main protagonist is missing his leg from the war. We like every single drawer, every other drawer you open, just bottles fall out, just in case you forgot. He's an alcoholic. He marries this young, talented pianist. She is his muse. He uses her as a model for a lot of his best paintings. Then there's a fire. Or does she leave him first? I think she leaves him first.
Yeah.
They
She
have
has
a
to come
kid.
back post fire.
She burns his paintings first, and then he beats her because he's an alcoholic.
In the
She
20s.
leaves, and then she like gets horribly burned while she's left him.
Yeah, it's in a department store that catches on fire.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
I don't know what importance that has.
Well, it explains, like, there's a bunch of write-ups that he sends to doctors saying, you gotta fix her. Not for me, though. For her. She needs to be pretty again. For her. Woman whose name is not...
I never
She doesn't have a name.
I never learned it.
Yep.
She's my wife. Why would I need her name? I just call her wife.
Exactly. So this, like, she gets burned in the fire, and this is after I think she has the baby as well.
Yes.
So she then comes back to live with main character, but she is wheelchair bound, and so he just kind of keeps her trapped upstairs, hardly ever able to leave her house or see anyone. They get a live-in maid, I believe, and then the main character has an affair with the maid. And then after being basically isolated and beaten and abused by her husband, the wife takes her own life in the bathroom, which is that
scene
bathroom
I
scene
alluded to earlier.
you alluded to. And that scene kind of plays out interestingly. Like, your main character is dunking their head in the tub and seeing, like, the scenes under the water as he's holding his breath. It's an interesting little effect. She kills herself. He then goes all the way mad in this game's parlance, and then basically butchers her body to make the bits for his magnum opus because he thinks that will bring her back or something.
Mm-hmm.
At least depending on what ending you get, I guess.
I mean, either way, he's using her body parts.
Yes, that's true.
Yep.
So you need to ultimately find a strip of her flesh, blood, bones that have been ground into a white powder, a finger that I guess he's using for dabbing, a brush made of hair, and then an eyeball. Because he needs a viewer.
Need someone to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is art without the viewer? I needed to gouge out the eyeballs. So yeah, you assemble all these bits, and every time you get one of those pieces of her, when you go back to everything kind of loops back into your studio, and you'll kind of reveal more of the painting. I thought it was going to be a cooler painting, honestly, at first. At first, it was like bloody flamingos, and I was like, that's cool.
Turns out it's a real shitty painting, too.
Yeah, at the end, it's just a painting of his wife. Or not, depending on what ending you get. So, Em, do you want to break down the 3 endings here?
Sure. The ending, and
Your internet's being weird again. Pete, you want to break down the endings?
Sure. So you have...
to do it.
Oh, fine, Em. Fine, you're better now.
More credit to you.
Okay. I fixed it with my proclamation. All right. The first ending, the ending you're most likely going to get is the loop ending, which is you've been in a time loop. You've been doing this forever. You finish the painting and it's your wife. And then it like turns into a zombie wife and laughs at you. And then you're like, no, I almost had it. And then you throw it in a room with a whole bunch of other paintings that look exactly the same, who are all also laughing at you. It seems as though you've been doing this for years, as your mental faculties begin to degrade, says the Wikipedia helpfully. And then if you go back in there, it is just like normal paintings, and you are dissatisfied with them regardless. And then you start the painting all over again.
Yeah, and I took that to mean like he is painting her before she's injured, and then the vision he sees when he looks at the painting is her after what he's done to her, and he can't separate what he's doing, the woman, the body he is seeing that he has butchered from the painting that he's trying to draw of her before everything he did to her. And so that schism just kind of keeps him from ever saying his work is done, which I think is a generous reading, because I don't think Bloober Team's operating on that level.
I just assumed it like morphed from pre-burn wife to post-burn wife. And he's like, no, she's ugly again. I must make her beautiful.
Yeah, and that's also, that actually I think is that's probably the more appropriate reading based on how everything is written in this game.
Yeah. It's the more obvious reading, certainly.
Yep.
Yeah. So what about ending 2? What about the good ending? What's the good ending?
Well, there's one that's like a medium ending, or I guess it depends on how you view it. There's the family ending, which is you finish the painting and it's your wife and also your daughter, and you realize that you were a fucking monster, and you throw that painting into a room of paintings and light them on fire, and then you stand in that fire as you burn to death, which I think is probably at least neutral.
It's certainly appropriate. It feels deserved.
Yeah, that feels like, the ending that he deserved. But then there's the, quote, good ending. So there's the selfish ending, which is where you paint a portrait and it's you. And then you hang the portrait upstairs, and then it like pans out and the painting is on display in a museum. And that is earned by ignoring basically all responsibility. You do not approach your ghost wife or your child ever, and you just like plug your ears. Just don't do anything.
It reminded me of a concept that gained a lot of traction a few years ago. So it's from I wish I knew how to pronounce her name, but Jenny Offill, Offill. She wrote this book called The Department of Speculation. It's a very good book. I've read it. It's pretty short. But she introduces this concept called the art monster. So I'm just going to read very quickly, quick 2 sentences. This is from, I think the chapter is called Magic and Dread. My plan was to never get married. I was going to be an art monster instead. Women almost never become art monsters because art monsters only concern themselves with art, never mundane things. Nabokov, meaning Vladimir Nabokov, didn't even fold his umbrellas. Vera, his wife, licked his stamps for him. So this is basically that, right? Where it's this story of this art monster who gave up literally everything to create his art, but it's fine because his art was really good. And I feel like we're increasingly in a society of art monsters for some reason.
Yeah, and I mean, this game, I think it says a lot that when the ending where your character runs into his ghostly wife and deals with the fact that he's abused his child, you either end up trapped in a prison of your own making trying to remake this painting over and over and over again, or you realize what you've done, and so you must kill yourself. That is the only way. Like, this game has such a dim view of someone with mental illness, alcoholism, struggles. Like, basically, the 2 outcomes where they deal with that trauma in any way, the game can only think of them killing themselves as the only outcome that makes sense. And then the ending where they just blindly slam forward, trying to basically just be selfish, focus on their own needs, ignore, push back everything that they did to the people that they're supposed to care about. In that ending, they end up a famous artist. Mm-hmm. So, like, the correct thing to do in this game's estimation is to be a narcissist.
It's definitely, Gino, you're definitely right that that's what the game's suggesting, but it's also like a weird meta-narrative that society has come to embrace, kind of. Mm-hmm. That, like, any sacrifice, regardless of whether you're forcing other people to sacrifice too, any sacrifice is worth it provided it leads to great art. Like, it's the weird too. Like, you ever see? Well, let me look this up before I say it. So somebody else keep talking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this game definitely has this vision that as long as the art that comes out of this guy stays good, and a lot of the writings of other characters who are interacting with the main character is like, I put up with a lot of weird stuff because these paintings were good, but now that these paintings are creepy, I don't want to deal with you anymore. And as long as his art is some level of compelling, basically he could do whatever he wants. People keep sending him, doctors keep responding to him. Exterminators keep sending him more exterminators. Like, because he's a renowned artist, he can get away with so much. And because his wife is a woman who's also a renowned artist, but she's still a woman, no one really seems to care that she just goes missing. After the fire, no one seems to come and check on her. When she loses her prominence as a pianist, because she has a baby and because she's married, no one comes and looks. But for him, the world bends over 3 times to make sure that this guy can keep producing art.
So I found what I was thinking of. So in his book, Talking to Strangers, Malcolm Gladwell makes this point about poets, that poets die young. So according to him, they have a much higher suicide rate than any other profession because, quote, something about writing poetry appears either to attract the wounded or to open new wounds. So his point is that poetry necessarily leads to, let's just say, mental instability. But Gladwell had basically no sources for this.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, I know, right?
Can't believe Malcolm Gladwell would just write something out of his ass and then everyone would take it and quote it.
He used this person who did this book where she was studying artists, and she just picked these 36 major poets, and she got to decide who were major poets and what time frame she was going to look at. Basically cherry picked all this data, but Malcolm Gladwell felt comfortable enough throwing it out. 1, because he's Malcolm Gladwell, but 2, because it fits with this idea we have about poets, that it's sort of great art and, let's call it, psychosis just go hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah, and this game just piggybacks on that, completely uninvestigated, completely uninterrogated. It uses so many shorthands. It's just okay, so we just have one piece of paper that says he's schizophrenic, and then everything else is fine. Everything else just makes sense to a reader, right? To a player. That's all we have to do. No more work. We don't have to explain what's going on in this guy's head. He's an alcoholic. That's all we have to say. They try to explain all of his behaviors through signifiers of being a damaged person, rather than who is this guy? Who is his family? Where's he from? What is his relationship with his wife? There's the sections where it's we were happy once. How? Why'd you fall in love with her? Because she played piano? Because she's beautiful? What's your family like? How did you become an artist? For a game that's solely about interrogating one person and their inner life, all that this game really cares about is the bits of him that are problematic or harmful. We don't actually know that much about this guy. We just know what he's done.
We know he's a vet. That's about all we know about his past.
Yeah.
And even too, they're trying to build out this whole metaphor of oh, his house is his mind, which, again, very tropey, right? This whole idea of oh, we're actually wandering through somebody's psyche. But like you said, they're only interested in the parts that are broken and twisted and horrible. And granted, the man is done a lot of horrible, horrible things, but it might have been nice to be oh, this is the room from when he was 12. And it's nice and breezy. And we learn a little bit about oh, who was he before this turn he made?
For having a house that is morphing around you, you would think that it would go through some of those other aspects of life, as opposed to just, you're pretty sad about what happened to your wife, aren't you? I don't know. It's an unanalyzed guy just wandering around.
And even if they wanted to do the art monster route, right? Okay, all this man has is art. There's no other parts of his personality, nothing else going on. we could still have seen the moments where he was a successful artist. Like the man had gallery shows. Newspapers loved him for a little while. Like, where's the room where he's like, oh, here's my success as a professional artist?
Or how's about, what if we saw any of his art?
Yeah,
Because
that's what I
all
was
of the
gonna
art
say.
that's
Good
in this
point, too.
game is like public domain art.
We do see one other picture. There's the magnum opus and creepy baby man.
Creepy Baby Man is not his.
That's not his?
Which one's
That's also public domain.
Oh, well then.
Everything.
which one's
Everything
creepy?
other than her. Other
It
than
was
the
the one
wife.
in the newspaper that like all the critics hated, where it's like a portrait of like it's called like a Shakespearean nobleman, but with a baby head.
Oh right, I thought that guy was really weird. That
Yeah,
was
so
just
Baby
strange.
Headman is also public domain. Like every single
disappointing.
painting in this, other than wife or him, depending on which ending you get, like just that painting, that's the only one. So like we don't even get to see what his good art looks like. We do see, I guess, some of the commissions. We see a couple of commissions.
But you guys, the art got destroyed. There's no art. We can't show it to you. I'm sorry.
Damn you, Em.
There was a fire. Can't
There was
have
a
the art in
fire.
his mental room. Yeah, so like it is a bummer, right? Like they don't really interrogate the wife. They say they give you a lot of I'm very unhappy. I would kill my husband if I could, but we don't get a lot of. And here's why I loved him. And here's what it's like being trapped in my room.
The only thing
Me and my baby.
The only thing I liked, yeah, right. She's a mother. Like,
She-
what was she doing? with
She
her
doesn't
child?
mention the baby once, I think, in any
No.
of her writing.
The one thing I did, the only thing about the portrayal of the wife that I did like was the way the handwriting changed in notes after the fire.
Yes, I
Yeah,
was
'Cause
going to
she
also
went
point
through-
that out.
Yeah, she went through extensive nerve damage. So like her writing becomes all like sort of jagged and cramped and everything. That was a nice touch. They get one nice touch.
Mhm.
yeah. So I think, like, we've gone through a lot of this stuff. What was your kind of takeaway? For me, this was probably the worst horror game I've ever played.
Yeah.
I at no point was scared. You kind of learn the rules of this world very quickly, and once you know what's going on and what can and can't hurt you, and guess what? Nothing can hurt you. And many of the horror, like there were so many times where a musical sting would play, and I just would go, "Was something supposed to scare me?
Yeah. What
Did
happened?
something happen?"
I looked around. It was all normal again, so I guess we missed that one.
Yeah, I guess missed the jump scare. Oops.
Oh well.
And like so much of it, they're just reusing the same assets over and over and over again to try and scare you. Like the book golem that I mentioned earlier, I was thinking, why would this be a thing that this guy would be scared of, right? So that I'm trapped in his mind. Why is he scared of books in the shape of a man? Why would that be a thing his mind would conjure up? And then I thought, well, it doesn't actually make sense. Nothing about this guy really seems like he's especially well read. The only book that I found that repeats, like there's a bunch of libraries, but the only book that I see a title of is The Portrait of Dorian Gray, which again, this game is evoking, but doesn't really deal with all that closely. The only thing that I could come up with was, they made a bunch of book objects to populate this world, and so they had these objects lying around that they could stack. Like there was one painting where like it was a painting of fruit, and then fruit started falling out of the painting.
That
I
was
was
so
like,
funny.
Yeah,
That
I thought that was hilarious.
Hilarious.
Free fruit.
There's
So like, yeah, go ahead.
there's not to get into a different game entirely, but in the second one, there's a clip where Voidberger was playing it, and they just like have fruit, just like you open a door and fruit just flies out at you. They love the fruit for some reason, and she cracks up. She thought it was hilarious, and it was hilarious. But I was like, wow, why do they do this?
I mean, the scene that I saw where I mean, there was one where I opened up a cabinet and then just bottles fell on me.
Yeah.
Like my character was just crushed under the weight of bottles. I was like, yeah, I get it. And they did it like 3 more times. I was like, I completely get it. Yeah, he's an alcoholic. I get it.
We made
Also,
all
like-
these bottles. We gotta use them.
even if he were an alcoholic, would he really need two steamer trunks full of alcohol in his studio? Like, just walk to the kitchen.
Mm.
The two steamer trunks and then every drawer
Yep.
just full of bottles. Yeah, it's really just a lot, this game. And it's not especially well made. Like, you can see the seams of all of the jump scares. Some of the jump scare, like very few of the jump scares land. A lot of the moments that are most terrifying are just the parts where it's doing PT, unmodified. The parts where it's trying to be original, it fails. The story it's trying to tell is not especially compelling. The characters are barely there.
Yeah, the characters are barely characters. You know what this story reminded me of is a thought that I have a lot. The more I like engage with the sort of like true crime boom that we're still in the midst of, is like just because something's horrible doesn't mean it's interesting. Like the world is full of terrible people and terrible things, and just listing them isn't analysis, it isn't narrative, it's just a cavalcade of horror.
Mm-hmm.
And like I thought of that here, right? Like just because this man is horrible and a terrible person in so many ways doesn't make him interesting.
Yeah. This is what I was also thinking about while I was playing this game, which is like, I know that there are tortured artists and that also bad things happen to people all the time in real life, but I feel like we have a perception of when bad things happen in media versus like when bad things happen in real life, which is vastly different. I don't know. It felt like the thing that I kept asking myself when I was playing this game was like, is anyone's life actually this terrible? Like, does this actually happen to people, or is this like just our media that is like, oh, but what if all of these things happened at once? What if your wife was horribly burned and also you were an alcoholic and also you had a child, I guess, and
you didn't like them.
You didn't like
them. And she was shitty at art.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like in real life, like a department store fire is obviously a tragedy.
Yes.
Right, and it has a certain gravity to it just in the fact that it is a tragedy. But like in a video game or a story or a movie, a department store fire is a story beat. Mm-hmm. It needs to advance something. It can't just sort of stand on its own.
Yeah. This game really it takes for granted that you're not going to think that hard. Like, I think it's just taking for granted that it's a haunted house, right? Like, haunted houses don't need a backstory all that much. You can just say it's a hospital, it's Blood Hospital. You know, it's spooky woods, it's abandoned factory, and then you don't need it. If a goblin jumps out 1 minute and then the next minute it's a zombie, who cares? It's a haunted house. They're just trying to show you creepy things. And if you lower your standards for what this game is trying to convey, if you don't try to compare this game against something like What Remains of Edith Finch or Gone Home, and you instead compare it to Five Nights at Freddy's, then this game looks a little better, right? Like, its jump scares work a little better. They're at least more understandable. But I think if you just lower the standards of how you're judging the game, isn't that an indictment of the game too?
Most definitely. It's also a question of the studio, right? So this brings us back to the sort of point we started with. All. Exactly, right? So do we know how the Bloobers got this?
I mean, Layers of Fear 1 and 2 sold incredibly well. Mm-hmm. Both of them were very successful. They are also one of the only studios of size that is making horror games, really. There's like Resident Evil is made by Capcom. They're not going to do a Silent Hill game. Like, that's an in-house studio for Capcom. Konami could not pull the Resident Evil folks. So there's really only a few large-scale companies that specialize in horror games. And Bloober Team, to be fair, before they made Layers of Fear, they basically just made like clones of other games. Like, they had not made they may have not ever made a single original game. Some would argue. Again, if you want to look up Ben vids, I think that he makes a pretty compelling case that they've never made a single original game. But they make pretty games. Their artists are good. And these games are very popular. Like Layers of Fear, for as much as it just apes PT and rips off PT, they did the PT ripoff the best or the most popularly of the many PT ripoffs. And then Layers of Fear 2, I think, also rips off PT in like different ways and rips off some other stuff too. But it's good looking. Like there are some scenes in this game. Like we didn't talk about the scene where there's a phone ringing and you have to like look up numbers and then put them into the rotary phone. But what you look up and in that scene, like you start out in an office and then eventually you look up and the ceiling's gone and there's just layers and layers of paintings spiraling up into the sky. Like some of the visuals in this game actually really hold together well, and look really good. So I could see why you would think this team is talented enough to make a Silent Hill game. And apparently, whatever their most recent game is, it's not The Witness. After Layers of Fear 2, they made another horror game that like almost directly rips off Silent Hill or apes Silent Hill, like down to the ghost world that, you know, is revealed periodically of The Medium. That game apparently also kind of does a similar thing as like Silent Hill. It does fog. It's got a lot of stuff like that. So those elements make it seem like, yeah, Bloober Team could probably do this. They've been kind of taking ideas from Silent Hill and Silent Hill adjacent properties basically since they made their pivot to doing horror games in 2016. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that, Em?
Which part?
Silent Hill, like why they would get the Silent Hill gig.
You basically summed it up. Like, I don't know anyone else who would pick up the license. They were sort of like top of the list, which if you are more linked up with that, like friend of the show Voidburger, she was dreading that they were top of the list for probably a year. And then, you know, who else is going to do it, basically? Like, yeah, I don't think there was anyone else who even came close because it was like between that and Resident Evil, like.
How long do you think it would take for A24 to get a game studio up and running?
Don't they have one?
Do that?
I don't know. Let's see.
What is A24?
Give it to them. They did Midsommar, The Vivitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
To the Lighthouse, Under the Skin, Nope. Whole bunch of horror movies.
I guess they don't. Not yet, anyway. Give it like 3 years, I'll say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll just pause Silent Hill until then.
Yeah, and I will say, given what Silent Hill 2 is about, I mean, Silent Hill 2 is about a bad man who committed some terrible crimes against his significant other and is beating himself up about it.
Basically, this game.
Yeah, basically this game, except there's more backstory there, and the game Silent Hill 2 does a better job of kind of unfolding things. And it sounds like Konami's got a pretty tight leash on Bloober Team, so they're probably going to have to reproduce a lot of it pretty faithfully. But I do think that Bloober Team has not shown that they understand how, like, what makes these horror games tick, what would make these characters compelling or make the moments unsettling. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, this definitely shows like surface level. We know that people want things thrown in their face, or they want to turn a corner and see some weird shadow monster shaking. But
and there are no diminishing returns.
Yeah,
turn the first corner, you turn the fifth corner, equally as good.
Just keep them coming. The more, the better. Oh man.
Turning a knob called jittering and waiting for applause.
Yep, basically. So we'll see what they do with Silent Hill 2. Not looking forward to it.
Nope. So with that, I think we'll close our discussion of Layers of Fear. But I think, you know, we had such a great time with AI-generated prompts. I think it's time once again for this new segment we've got going. We still need to come up with a name for it. I don't know. Rate that robot? Grade that robot? I don't know. But we'll need to come up with a name for this.
We'll workshop it.
But Pete, we've got some more prompts written for you by the finest machines.
Lay them on me. If there's two things I love, it's prompts and machines.
Em, do you want to go first?
Okay, I have... Well, mine is like I asked for 3 prompts at once, and so I have 3 paragraphs here. Where should we start? Where would you like to start, Gino? I have...
What do we got?
Well, it would spoil them to reveal.
Just pick one.
I haven't read them yet.
Oh, even better.
This is also a surprise to me. I just saw that it produced words, and I was like, good enough.
Wasn't even sure if they're English, but I know they're words.
All right. I'm just going to start reading. It's going to be 4 paragraphs. It is no secret that Layers of Fear is one of the most popular horror games of recent years. The game's success can be attributed to its innovative gameplay, its horrifying atmosphere, and its ability to send chills down the player's spine. However, what makes Layers of Fear truly unique is its ability to be analyzed through a number of different lenses. In this paper, I will be analyzing the game through a postmodern, Freudian, and Chuck Tingle lens.
Who does that? Who writes a paper like that?
All right, here we go. Through a postmodern lens, Layers of Fear can be seen as a deconstruction of the horror genre. The game's developers have taken the traditional elements of horror games and turned them on their head. For example, the game's protagonist is not a typical hero who is trying to save...
That's true.
That's true. Who is trying to save the world from a monster or evil force. Instead, the protagonist is a painter who is trying to complete his masterpiece. This change in perspective allows the player to see the horror genre from a new and unique perspective. I would argue that... I'm now editorializing. I would argue that the protagonist is the villain of this story. Also not sure if that was postmodern or not. But let's keep it going.
I mean, you could say anything turns anything on its head, and I guess it becomes postmodern, but I don't...
Yeah. If you do something badly, maybe it's postmodern.
I was going to say, it's a very generous way to describe stealing.
Yeah. The game's use of Freudian psychology is also noteworthy. The game's developers have used Freudian concepts such as the id, ego, and superego to create a truly nightmarish experience. For example, the game's protagonist is constantly tormented by his id, which is represented by the monster in the game. The id is the part of the psyche that is responsible for our basic desires and needs. The id is also known for its ability to override the ego, which is the part of the psyche that is responsible for our sense of reality. The game's use of Freudian psychology allows the player to experience the horror of the id in a very real and tangible way.
I mean, nobody mentioned dicks or my mother in the entire game, so I don't think it was very Freudian.
I feel like we need more dicks and mothers in this this horror game.
Definitely.
All right. Now the doozy. Finally, the game can also be analyzed through a Chuck Tingle lens. For those who are not familiar with Chuck Tingle, he is a prolific writer of erotic fiction. His work often features unlikely creatures, such as dinosaurs or aliens. In Layers of Fear, the player takes on the role of a painter who is trying to complete his masterpiece. The player is constantly tormented by a monster that represents the id. The player must use their own sexual desires to overcome the monster and complete the painting. Sure. This uses sexuality in a very unique and interesting way to approach the horror genre. I want to play what game they're thinking of.
I gotta sex this monster into submission.
Why can't we play that game next time?
So Pete, what would you give this essay?
I'd give it a lot of confused stares.
I love that it's just like here is a textbook definition of Freudian stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to mention one thing from this game and one thing from Freud, and that's enough, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Don't analyze whether they belong next to each other.
I've connected the dots. You haven't connected shit.
You can see that I've connected the dots because I said I did.
Yeah.
This essay is like, I gave him the assignment, like, oh, you need to use a critical lens. Like, oh, you want one? I'm gonna give you 3. It's like, oh, you like hamburgers? You like donuts? What if I made a hamburger with donuts for buns?
I've got one for you. This one, I think you're going to pick up the lens pretty quick. Layers of Fear is a 2016 first-person psychological horror game developed and published by Bloober Team. The game's narrative revolves around a troubled painter in the late 1800s who's trying to complete his final work. As the player descends into madness, the game's environment and gameplay change to reflect his increasingly unstable state of mind. From a Christian perspective, Layers of Fear can be seen as a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and the dangers of pursuing creative endeavors without a strong grounding in faith. The game's protagonist is a man who is consumed by his own ego and his desire to create art for art's sake. He's so focused on his own work that he ignores the warnings of those around him, and he ultimately pays the price for his arrogance. The game's artwork and atmosphere are heavily inspired by the works of the French artist Gustave Doré. Doré was known for his dark and macabre illustrations, which often featured Christian themes. The game's developers have said they were heavily inspired by Doré's work, and they wanted to create a game that would capture the same feeling of unease and dread that his illustrations evoke. Yes?
Did the robot just make up a quote?
Yes, I think. Maybe they were influenced by that artist. I don't know. While Layers of Fear is not overtly Christian in its themes, it does contain a number of Christian symbolism and imagery. For example, the game's protagonist is often seen standing in front of a crucifix or praying to Jesus. In one scene,
that's not overtly Christian.
In one scene, the protagonist's wife tells him that he is not a good man and that he never has been. This could be seen as a reference to the fall of man and to the idea that all of us are sinners in need of redemption.
Mm-hmm.
The game's title, Layers of Fear, could also be seen as a reference to the 7 deadly sins. The protagonist is a man who is consumed by his own greed, pride, and lust. As he descends into madness, he becomes more and more consumed by these sinful desires.
I mean, look, this one, I was about to say that this one was the most accurate. Like, when they started with hubris, arrogance, art for art's sake, like, they were close, and then they talked about him praying to Jesus, and it derailed.
Yeah, so here's one more, just to send it home. I'm going to skip the beginning, because the beginning also... Well, no, I think I should say, because I like that the robot is putting different words in the mouth of the developer every time.
Yeah, I like the robot just making up lies now.
Yeah.
Layers of Fear, released in 2016, is a first-person psychological horror game developed and published by Bloober Team. The game's plot follows an artist who's driven into insanity by the creative process. The game is heavily inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft and is set within a Victorian-era mansion. The game's protagonist is an artist who is attempting to finish his magnum opus, Capitals. The player must navigate the protagonist's psyche and uncover the secrets of the mansion in order to progress. The game features a number of environmental puzzles, and the player must utilize the protagonist's abilities in order to progress. Mm-hmm. His abilities of art and walking. Layers of Fear is a game that can be seen from a number of different lenses. In this essay, I will be discussing the game from a communist lens. First and foremost, it is important to understand that Layers of Fear is a work of fiction, and as such, should not be taken as an accurate representation of communist ideology. That being said, the game does present a number of interesting ideas that can be seen from a communist perspective. The most obvious communist element of this game is its setting. The game is set in a Victoria-era mansion, which is a clear representation of the ruling class during that period. The protagonist is an artist who is attempting to create his magnum opus. Period. This can be seen as a direct analogy for the proletariat attempting to create art under the oppressive conditions of the bourgeoisie.
What?
Yes.
The game's plot also contains a number of elements that can be interpreted from a communist perspective. The artist's descent into madness can be seen as a metaphor for the way the ruling class drives the proletariat into insanity. The secrets of the mansion can be seen as a representation of the secrets of the ruling class, and the player uncovering these secrets can be seen as a victory for the proletariat.
Damn right.
How many A's would this get?
I mean, it would get a meeting at my office hours to discuss communism. I don't think this person. I don't think this person knows what communism is. I think they just know bourgeoisie bad, proletariat good. End of end of list.
Ugh. I just
Fuck.
like that you could just take anything. It's just like, well, technically this was a victory in the game, and therefore it's a victory of the proletariat over the bourgeoisie.
The struggle of the proletariat to create art.
Famously.
The greatest struggle the proletariat had.
The Victorian house that the protagonist lives in can be seen as an example of the ruling class. But then you can also see that he's cross-pressured, you see.
It's the dialectic.
Yep. It's dialectic.
Oh god.
Please write in if you're enjoying these bits, because
We definitely
boy.
are.
We are.
We really hit on something here.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's good or not, but
please, and if you want different lenses, please.
Oh, yeah.
We'll throw anything into this machine. We should do ad copy next time.
Is that an option?
Fuck.
Oh, I mean, anything's an option. It's AI generation, my friend.
I love bad ad copy. I collect it.
Oh boy, yeah, we could. Yes, Layers of Fear as a McDonald's ad. We should. Yep, we'll get more esoteric with it. Write in if you like this. Write in if you don't. But please give us prompts, because this is. Oh boy, science has gone too far.
Yep.
All right, so with that, I think we've wrapped up Layers of Fear. Thank you for picking this, Pete. For giving us the perspective on what we have to look forward to in Silent Hill 2 Remake.
You all are welcome.
Thank you, Em.
Thank you for another game I'll never look at again.
You're not going to get all 3 endings?
God, no. In
All
order
the
to get all the
collectibles?
endings, you have to replay the whole game again.
If you wanted all the collectibles, it takes about 12 hours. Can you
Okay,
imagine?
Hold on. What are the collectibles? What are you collecting?
Rat drawings.
Oh, okay.
And, like some sort of whispers and family mementos.
Newspaper clippings.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Before we get off of it, did anyone play the DLC? The add-on?
Oh, no.
I didn't even know there was DLC.
I only learned about it because I read the Wikipedia page. Apparently, there is the Inheritance downloadable content add-on.
Is that the one where you play as the daughter?
Yeah,
you play as the daughter, and the daughter. So there's multiple endings on that one too. The ending where you try to become more in touch. I think the one if you try to get your dad's approval. Basically, the endings are you leave the house, like trying to find your inheritance, and you like get a painting that he left you. One of them, you get more in touch with your artist self, and it drives you mad, and you, I think, kill yourself and burn yourself to death in the house.
Wonderful.
Fun.
And then there's a neutral ending.
The true ending.
Oh,
So-
the true ending's the one where you kill yourself because
Oh.
Of
you've
course.
become mad.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all good stuff here. It's cheery.
This is
Something
a game that
to
has
brighten
an
your
understanding
day.
and respect for people who have dealt with mental struggles.
Mhm.
For sure. Okay, so with that, Em, it's your turn to pick again.
It's my turn.
Layers of Fear
Uh-oh.
2.
Oh yeah.
I thought about it. I'm not gonna lie. Then I saw the video and I was like, nope, not even for this. So back at the beginning of the year, I promised that I would give a year of torture, and we are gradually coming down to the wire on the year of torturous games, only like a third of which I have picked.
I was going to say, I feel like I've contributed this week.
Yes, I barely had to do much this year because most of our picks were not very good. The promise I made was that I would pick bad games that were too long, games that were weird, games that Gino wouldn't like specifically. So So I have a collection of games here which might fit the bill. You have a choice of 3.
Oh, goody. Do I get to choose, or is this Pete?
Would you like to... These are all going to be long-form games. We're probably going to take multiple weeks as opposed to our usual rotation.
Curse you.
Yeah, I promise this. So, would you like to choose at random, or would you like me to give you the list?
Give me the list.
All right. Your choices are a game which is going to have a sequel coming up this coming month. So it will be timely. We could play the 2018 God of War, which is all right, but it's very long. We could play a game which I've been thinking about specifically because of news as of yesterday. We could play The Witcher 3, also very long, but I don't think we played a Witcher yet.
We have not.
Or we could
I thought
play...
we played 2. We played 2 a while ago.
Did we play 2?
A while ago.
I don't remember that.
This was with Billy. This was a while back.
Yep. Well,
probably talking about drop charts the whole time.
Yeah. Well, take that into consideration. Or the final one, we could play a game that I started to play a while ago and then fell off of. We could play Devil May Cry 5.
The 5th Devil May Cry.
Which one is that? Is that after Dante's Awakening? No, that's 3.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the last one I played.
Is 5 the one with Nero?
5 is the one with Nero and Dante and a third guy.
Man, how edgy can you get?
You could get very edgy. We could discover it together.
Oh, is this DMC Devil May Cry, the remake one, the reboot? No, not.
No, this is a standalone game that came out in... When did this come out? Probably 2019.
Okay. Set several years after Devil May Cry 4. Recurring protagonist Dante and the protagonist of the fourth installment Nero. Okay. I vote for God of War because I liked the old Gods of War.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least I liked God of War 2 or 3. I forget I think I played both 2 and 3 and I enjoyed those. And I want to see the weird Norse. Finally, we'll cover a game that does Vikings.
A Viking story. I don't think this is that one. I think the new one is going to be Vikings.
No, this one's Vikings too. The reboot is Vikings. The second one, God of War Ragnarok, is also Vikings, but more.
It's just continuation of Vikings. Gotcha.
Vikings harder.
Okay. Pete, any preference?
So I remember I played Devil May Cry 3 so long ago that I was dumb enough to think Dante was cool. So I would like to revisit that world and see how wrong I was.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we've got a split, and then
it's a toss-up.
The most appropriate thing for you to do is say screw you to both of us, and then
fuck out both of you. I'm playing Witcher 3. It's timely. I think we're gonna go God of War, because the sequel is coming out, and also it's kind of Christmassy.
Oh yeah, there's snow.
There's snow. There's elves.
What number is this?
It's just God of War.
Just God of War.
2019 God of War.
They just did the hard reboot and said, to hell with all of the old stuff. We're not coming up with a new name.
Yes.
Because I'll be damned if I'm playing the wrong God of War.
If you are playing the one that does not have a child following you around, it's the wrong one.
Yep.
What do I need following me around?
A child.
Kid.
Oh, that's the kid one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where he's like, boy.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, so next up we're playing God of War, not the first one, but the reboot.
The first one of the new one.
The first one of the new ones, again. So thank you, Pete.
Yep. Always a good time talking games with you all.
Thank you, Em.
Thank you. Looking forward to the next one. Also, my brother would like to be on the show if we are covering God of War.
Okay.
So he has no qualifications, but he's played the game a lot.
Perfect.
That's fine.
Fits right in.
That's fine.
I'll let him know.
And thank you, listeners and folks hanging out in Twitch chat. Just a reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. And if you're in a position to do so, please donate to the National Network of Abortion Funds. Until next time, peace.
Break it down